If you are a smart, ambitious woman in leadership and you are so frustrated and fed up with your public speaking fears, despite all of the experience and expertise you have, then you are in the right place, my love. You are not a failure. It's not that some people are naturals and you aren't. There's nothing particularly wrong with you in that kind of way. All it is that you just haven't found a system yet that's comprehensive enough and goes deeply enough to address those fears at their root. That's why the stuff that you're trying right now or have in the past, it might help you to perform in the moment, but it doesn't kind of lead to any sustainable change, and it still feels really, really tough. So you're in the right place. So my name is Ari Nisha. I'm a public speaking coach, and I'm also an ordained Buddhist. I joined the Triratna Buddhist order in 2021. Need to get my decades right. I'm 36, so sometimes I have to count. Like, was that 2011 or 2021? Yeah, I was ordained in 2021 and given this lovely, lovely name. Someone once described it as a Disney princess name, and I will take that. And it means she whose dream is of the noble ones. I'll tell you a little bit more about my journey with Buddhism at the moment. But yeah, I've been ordained, 5 years now. And it was for me, it was a 7-year training process. It takes everyone different amounts of time. I'm not celibate, if you're interested. I wouldn't be a monk. I'm not a nun. Our order is neither monastic nor lay. Probably do a few more other videos at some point about the specifics of my order. But anyway, I thought it would be important to share with you my kind of take on public speaking fears, because everything that I do, everything that I offer in my coaching and training is rooted in these 2,500-year-old practices and principles. Sometimes people ask, oh, where have you trained, or have you got a certificate or whatever. I was like, it's been primarily through my order and lots of life experience. So this is it. I'm going to outline some of that today. I've got some notes on my laptop so I don't get too lost. Okay, so this is for you, whatever your experience of Buddhism and meditation. You might be completely new, or you might have like decades of experience. And hello, if you're in my order, I love you. Hi. So if you're new, just going to help you understand fear. Yeah, because that's what we're dealing with here. Although it's public speaking fear, like fear is fear, as we'll talk about in a bit. So yeah, I want to help you understand your fear. And I'm going to map out some of the practices and principles that will help you work with it. And then also help you understand some gaps in what you might have read or heard about out there in the wild west of social media and LinkedIn and self-help books and all of that. Because a lot of women find that they try things, and you might have tried them quite sincerely actually for a period of time, but it doesn't work. And I've got some ideas on that. And this isn't to bash like other coaches, like a lot of respect for what other people are out doing. But of course, as a Buddhist, and Buddhism and meditation and all these kind of practices have really transformed my life in so many ways, I'm obviously biased because I'm like, well, it's worked for me, and the other stuff like didn't work. I didn't feel it went deep enough, but this stuff really has. So I really want to share that with you. So yeah, you might understand, because I think often women are feeling like, why am I still like this? You try things out and you're frustrated and it doesn't work enough. So this might explain to you why that is. And then if you're on the other end of the spectrum with Buddhism, you've got a lot of experience with it, or maybe with meditation, you might be meditating for years but still have public speaking fears. Oh, I rhymed unintentionally. Then I'm going to help you map what you've been doing onto its relevance for public speaking, and you'll see that in some of my other videos as well. Because a lot of women have what I've called domain specific skills blindness. I made that turn up. It sounds quite fancy, doesn't it? It basically means you're able to do things in one situation but not another. And I've had this time and time again with women who have practiced, for example, like the metta bhavana, the love and kindness practice within my Buddhist community. And they're like, I can do this, what we call on the cushion. You do meditation on your cushion, but it doesn't transfer over into public speaking. And I just say to them, look, you need to learn to love your audience, like do the metta bhavana for them, like beforehand, and imagine you're doing it during the session. Yeah, that you're kind of in this kind of cocoon of loving kindness. And they're like, oh my gosh, that totally transformed things. I'm like, mind blown. The Buddha did say that we need to learn how to, like, for example, mindfulness, we need to be mindful when we're sat down and when we're standing. Yeah, we need to be mindful in all our situations. So the skills that you've learned so far will apply. And if you're in my order similarly, like you have so many skills already, it's just seeing how these map onto a particular context. Because what's really interesting about public speaking, and I think what often makes it quite a loaded situation, is we make it mean a particular thing. Like we're just communicating with each other. Yeah, I'm communicating with you right now. This is like public speaking. Like any situation like where you're being viewed, speaking is public speaking, whether it's one-to-one or front of a crowd or over YouTube or whatever. But we do some funny things with it, I think, in our head, or we've had some particular experiences of it, where it becomes a certain kind of category of experience, and that's what makes it feel a bit more loaded. So yeah, you can have different levels of experience and interest in Buddhism and meditation. I'm not teaching Buddhism explicitly when I'm coaching. Like all of my methods are kind of informed, inspired by it. I'm really clear when it is a specific Buddhist thing, but you don't need to be a Buddhist or want to be Buddhist. You could be from a completely different religion. I do not mind. Just take what's useful for you. You can also have different levels of experience with public speaking. Like some women have like decades of work beneath their belt, but then don't do a huge amount of public speaking until later in life. Or it might be then you've done a lot and your confidence levels have gone up and down. That's really interesting, isn't it? Like that's been my experience, as you'll hear from my story in a bit. Often more responsibility comes with more risk, and lots of things can happen to us, and we can have real confidence dips. So it might be that you were confident in the past, and actually this has kind of emerged. Now it's a new thing you're going to have to deal with. That's completely fine. I help women like you too. So, broad range of people here. What you might want to do right now is just reflect on if there's one kind of particular question or thing that you're struggling with that might be helpful for you to just bring to mind as we go through this. Sometimes it's good to get just clear on what is it that you're bringing. Yeah. So maybe you could finish the sentence, I wish I could, or I wish I knew how to, or I wish I didn't. Like, what's your wish? Yeah, what's your heart wish for working through these public speaking fears? Like, I wish I didn't blush so much when asked a question by journalists, or I wish I didn't get shaky if I need to hold notes, or I wish I didn't freeze if someone asked me a difficult question. Like, what is it for you? Let's try and be as specific as possible, and we'll see if something comes up as I'm talking that's a bit of an aha moment for that. I might not give you the whole solution. Well, I certainly am not going to give you the whole solution today, but it will be a thread that you can pick up in the rest of the videos. And also you can apply to have your question answered on this series. There will be a link in the description. I'll pop it below actually in the video, but it's also in my bio. So yeah, you can come and have your question answered on this show. I'd love to do that for you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit first about my journey with fear, public speaking and Buddhism, because that's of interest, and also it builds up trust. People will go on, won't they, about how important it is to build up trust when you're talking to people. Storytelling is a really helpful way of doing that. But yeah, you just might be intrigued. Some people are, basically, about my life. Little old me. So I'm going to tell you a little about little old me, including the fact that I fumble on my words. You'll discover that if you haven't already. I'm very open about the fact that I do. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. And then just notice, actually, as I'm going through that story, like notice where there might be some similarities in your story and my story too. Like where might we connect? Where might we be different? And then I'm also going to, after I've done that, I'm going to get into a little bit of content around Buddhism and around practices that fit into two loose buckets called samatha and vipassana, or vipassana, depends on how you're pronouncing these things, whether you're doing it in Pali or Sanskrit. By the way, I really don't mind if I get words wrong in Buddhism. There's so many lists and words and mispronunciations, it's all fine here. So we're going to do that, and then as I work through that, we'll put kind of practices that you can try for public speaking into these two different buckets, and then you'll get an idea of what you've tried and where there might be gaps as we go through that. And I have some notes on my laptop, which is why I'm looking down here. So I was co-leading a meditation retreat a few years ago, and someone at the end of it said, multiple women said, oh, you seem like such a natural doing this. And it's just so funny to me when people say this, because I was terrified of not just public speaking, but I had like quite bad social anxiety in general. So it's, well, it probably makes sense actually in some ways that I am now doing this as a coach and trainer, because I think when you've gone through some of the stuff that I have, then you basically know what you're talking about a bit more, because you know how hard it is to fix some of this stuff. And you realize how much advice out there is what I call nice but useless advice. When you've dealt with this level of anxiety and visibility fears, then yeah, you know what works and what doesn't, who are women like you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. So I remember as a child my mum saying, "Speak for it, Charlotte." So before I was ordained, I was called Charlotte. My family called me Lottie. Actually, I grew up in Wiltshire, so you didn't say Lottie, you say Lottie. And then I went to Charlotte when I was a bit older. Basically, I went to Cambridge and Lottie just didn't work in Cambridge. So I went to Charlotte. It just worked better. Lottie sounded really weird too. But yeah, I remember having some issues with like speech and language when I was little, but apparently I grew out of it. I was just messaging my mum about it the other day. I did have some help for a lisp. But there's I mean, I've only recently been diagnosed with ADHD. So if I look back, I can see how some of the things around like words and speech probably were to do with like delayed development in that area. And I probably, you know, definitely have still some things. Like stumbling on my words, for example, feels like it comes from my mind going quicker than my mouth. It's like, it doesn't always feel like it's connecting up. But yeah, I look back on few things as a kid and I go, oh, okay, maybe that's something to do with undiagnosed ADHD at that point. But I broadly remember being quite a confident young child. My mum home educated my sister and I for a couple of years. That was great. And then when I went back into mainstream school and we moved after my parents divorced, I started being bullied for being smart, as will often happen to kids who are smart from state school backgrounds. And so yeah, I got called all the usual names that you get called. And I remember in particular a girl called Jessica, who in a moment of spite decided to rip up my work because I'd finished it before her. What a little cow. Kids are horrible to each other, aren't they? And then I went to secondary school and it got worse. Boy I'd been at primary school with, he was beaten up so badly he actually got moved schools. His parents could afford to put him into private school, so he went there. So I had this funny old thing around being smart but trying to be invisible around it to stay safe. And I remember in the first year or two of that secondary school being up front to read a poem at assembly, because that's the thing when you're smart in state schools, like often you get asked to do things and then that makes you more of a target. So I was asked to read this poem and I still remember to this day like the heat, like from the light blaring down onto my face, going bright red, blushing. And I was also shaking, like I was reading from a piece of paper and I was shaking. And I remember hearing the kids in the front row, like basically like sniggering, and making a comment about how I was nervous and blushing. It was awful. So I've got a few situations in school where, yeah, I had unpleasant public speaking experiences, but mainly like just being me and just being smart, putting my hand up to answer a question or ask a question. That there was just like constant like negative experiences around that. So yeah, I had this whole funny thing of like needing to try and stay small and invisible, but I also really wanted to get out of that environment. So it was this real push-pull. And at some point it became clear that I would have the grades to at least apply to Oxbridge, which only one person had ever done from my sixth form and she didn't get in. So I applied to Cambridge. My friend Ollie applied to Oxford. And I got in and I pushed really, really hard to get those grades. And then I got to Cambridge and I went from being afraid to be seen as smart to being afraid of not being smart enough. And oh my gosh, was it such a huge step up. And again, looking back and seeing that I had undiagnosed ADHD, I can see how some of that contributed to it. But also I just had a very different schooling background. For about 6-7 years, I dated a guy who went to Eton, so like one of the best schools in the world, really, and like compared to my school. And so his like ability to articulate himself and just kind of tackle ideas, and I think it's just his confidence in himself actually it was just like completely different to mine, yeah. And I do remember sitting down sometimes and just like crying over like essays, trying to start them, and just being so. I would never ask a question in a lecture. Like occasionally I'd want to ask something and I'd go to put my hand and I'd think about even putting my hand up, and I would just, again, like I'd start to shake. I could feel it and I'd blush. Even the idea of speaking in front of people and these like incredible lecturers and academics and all these like super smart like young adults, I was like, it was terrifying. Absolutely not. And it just became so frustrating because what I saw is that sometimes there'd be students there, I want to call them kids, but like, you're not kids when you're 18, are you? Still sounds a bit patronising now. But I remember people would give their opinion very confidently, and I would know that it was a load of rubbish, basically. But I didn't have the ability or the confidence to articulate myself that quickly in the moment, so I couldn't say anything. And so there was this, and that wasn't everyone, but there are some people who are like that in any situation, not just Oxbridge. So what I felt was there were these peers who were just flying past me because they were confident and could articulate themselves, and they were putting themselves up for things and doing debating and all sorts of stuff like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I don't sort out my public speaking fears, like I'm just going to see them continuously fly past me, and I'm not going to do what I want in work. And I felt really passionate about making a difference in the world. I was studying social and political sciences, and just becoming more and more aware, like as you do a lot, I imagine you've done, like you become aware of all these things going on in the world. I've had quite a sheltered life in some ways. So yeah, aware of all these challenges in the world and things that need to get fixed and suffering going on around the world. And I wanted to do something. I had that real heart response of wanting to be of service in the world. But yeah, just seeing like that would not be so possible for me, or wouldn't be able to do the things other people were doing if I can't get through this fear. So at that point, I decided to start forcing myself to do things I didn't want to do. Now, when I've been younger, I'd sign up for stuff and then cancel and then lie about why I was cancelling. And I did that a little bit when I was at Cambridge, but I put myself forward for being women's officer at my college. I was at Pembroke College. And after that, I did more stuff on like the Women's Union, and eventually went for a sabbatical role for the Students' Union, which meant I had to do this like university-wide election during, I think it was in the run-up to my finals as well, which was mad. Yeah, but I really started just pushing myself to do stuff. So that was a point that I just started taking this quite hard approach. Don't have any water. Always make sure you have water. Oh, there we go. I'll get a cup. We'll do another session on things to make sure you have when you're talking. So yeah, I started having this really harsh approach to forcing myself to do things even though I was terrified, and finding a way of masking all of that fear where I could. And that kind of worked, really. I did, interesting stuff after graduation. I had some, I first started working for the Institute for Sustainable Leadership, and then I went and worked, volunteered in India for a year. I was like very anxious for a number of reasons at this point in my life, which I won't go into here. And then when I came back, I started work for a company called Verisk. Well, it's now called Verisk. Maplecroft was called Maplecroft back then. And I was an ethical supply chain consultant for international businesses. So I was regularly presenting to and talking with and supporting business execs of, global businesses like household brands that you'll have in your house right now. And by this point, I'd learned to be what I call like a swan. Yeah. So just like super smooth on the front, I was like on the outside, like I was like suited and booted, had like my nice clothes in London, and I just remember like sort of power walking around the city in the Oxford Street, going off to all these meetings. But underneath I was a mess. I was so anxious. It was like I was scrabbling to keep up. And I started to go and see a counsellor at this point. So just backtrack a little bit, come across Buddhism just after I graduated from Cambridge in 2011. Went off, did a few things. I was convinced I was a Buddhist after that first retreat, got involved a little bit at the Cambridge Buddhist Centre, went to India, came back. When I landed back in London in 2013, the same time as I got this job at Maplecroft, it's like big, corporate job that, I'd kind of always wanted with bigger profile. I started going along to the London Buddhist Centre then as well. And I knew I needed to sort out this anxiety really, because it was not helpful. It was like creeping a lot into work and other areas of my life. So I started seeing a counsellor who was also ordained within the Buddhist order. And we did a lot of work around what I call shiny Charlotte. So there was this version of me who I could kind of perform in professional environments, this mask that I would put on, because I was just completely disconnected from this kind of persona that I had and how I actually felt inside. So we did a lot of work around like coming back into the body and noticing how I was feeling, and noticing the anxiety and just working out like what to do with it, how to actually regulate my nervous system, how to calm. Because I found like the meditation practices I'd learned through the Buddhist center like very, very good, but I had such strong experiences of anxiety, and I'd already had a number of panic attacks by that point, that I just needed methods that would actually make me feel okay in my body. Like if you've never meditated before and you hear that it will make you feel calmer, but you've been having panic attacks for anxiety, and then you suddenly start meditating, you will not feel more calm. Most people won't. You'll just feel highly anxious, not because of the meditation, but because meditation makes you stop avoiding your experience. And mobile phones enable us to do this all the time. And like, notice what's going on here. That's what I mean by coming back into the body. Is actually like feeling your body, because most of the time we're disconnected and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. So she helped me to do that, just to notice and work out what to do with all the anxiety and the fear that was coming up. Some of it was public speaking fear, but as I said, like fear is fear, so a lot of it was to do with other stuff going on. So that made fear become this kind of familiar thing, and I learned these different methods that I'll share on the channel as well, that helped with working with a lot of anxiety in a lot of contexts. And so a year later, so I asked for ordination in 2014. A year later, I decided to leave my very lovely boyfriend at the time. Just worked out we weren't quite right for each other, and I split up. And I remember this was a massive shift for me around fear that applies to public speaking as well. So I remember deciding to go. I was coming home from work, and I can still remember walking from North Greenwich tube station near the O2. So I was walking home to our flat. I knew I was going to tell him that evening. He was coming back from a trip. He'd been in Burma and in Myanmar. So he was coming back, and I knew I was going to need to tell him. Oh no, I think it was the day after. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And I felt really anxious. I was really scared, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to need to leave and sort out my life, blah, 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 blah. Also knew I was going to leave my job to go and have a bit of a Buddhist gap year. And I realised as I was walking home, it's like, oh, I know this sensation in my body. This is what I mean by fear is fear. Yes, the content was different. Me deciding to leave my partner was different content to other stuff I'd been exploring in the counselling. But it's like, what was actually going on in my body, the feeling in my stomach, what was happening with my heart rate, my breathing, all of that, as it's happened in panic attacks for other things. It's like, oh, this is the same. Like, I know how to work with this. I don't know how to do all the rest of this stuff yet. I don't know what to say and what I'll do tomorrow or even this evening for where I live and all of that. But it's like, I know how to work with anxiety in the body. And that was such a point of freedom for me. It was so revolutionary. I was like, the context is different, but fear is fear. And I know how to work with fear in the body. So, after that point, I made quite a lot of improvements in fear and public speaking, but I was still very new, in a way, my Buddhist, well, not in a way, I was definitely still very new in my Buddhist and my meditation practice. So a lot of what I was still doing was pushing myself into hard things. Like I was scared about leaving my partner, but I was freaking going to do it anyway, And I decided to have this gap year of doing all sorts of like interesting things within my Buddhist community, and I was going to travel to New Zealand and Australia, But it started off with this month-long silent meditation retreat camping in Devon. And I got down there, and I remember having a meditation review not long into it, maybe the first week, with Maitri Devi, who I love. She runs retreats at Tara Loka. You can probably go and be on a retreat with her, actually, even if you're not in the Buddhist order, because they do open retreats at Tara Loka, which is in Wales. Is it in Wales? Yeah, it is in Wales. It's kind of like on the border, but it's actually in Wales. And so I remember talking to her about fear, because I had a lot of fear coming up in a meditation practice, because that's what happens when you meditate, right? Is you just sit down and you're just you with your mental states. And if we're doing 4 weeks of that, we were getting up at like 6 o'clock every morning to meditate. That was all we did pretty much, apart from like chores and things like that. There's loads of meditation all through the day. And well, there's no kind of separation in the end actually between meditation and not meditating. It was just different ways of being with your mind. But anyway, I might share more about the retreat if you're interested at some point. So yeah, I went into this meditation review with her, and I said something about like my relationship with fear, because we have this like what we call the Abhaya mudra in Buddhism. So this mudra of fearlessness. And I can't remember what I had said, but I must have given something away about my like naive and deluded view about working with fear, which is something to do with like pushing, or at least standing firm in the face of fear. Yeah. And she said, and it blows my mind to this day, she said something like, oh, like for me it just reflects like the open quality of the heart. It's like boom. Like my whole life so far was just like push through fear. Like, do not be pathetic. If you want what you want, like you want to go and get it, like you just need to push. Yeah, it wasn't even that, it was like it's cutting. In Buddhism, what we'd call like the Vajra, like the lightning thunderbolt and energy is like cutting through the fear, cutting through like holding yourself back, all of that. And then I'd gone into like, okay, I'm just going to be like this with fear, and I've made all this list. Like I'd put myself on to go and do like bungee jumping in New Zealand. Yeah, I hate heights. And it was like my whole idea around my life and what I decided to do for this gap year just kind of like disappeared, and like it like crumbled, or just like, as you know, it was like waking up from something. I was like, oh yeah, I'm not doing this in the right, not like the right way as if there's like a perfect way of doing it, but like I just realized that my way of approaching fear was deluded and causing me a lot of suffering as well. And what I didn't know is how to approach fear with this like open quality of the heart, and that became this kind of real thing I had to work on for like a number of years. Like I still am now. Yeah, I'm always working on this kind of open, kind of strong but sort of also gentle openness of the heart. Much today if you ever watch this, thank you. So yeah, I then went into this like year of like really scary things. I was like, I still did, actually I didn't have to do the bungee jump in the end because it was cancelled. But anyway, come back from this lovely, well, I say lovely, it was very intense gap year. I had panic attacks for the reasons during that time. I did this very intensive 5-month residential course for young women at a retreat centre called Adhisthana during that period as well. But I came back off of that year off, and I went into social housing in London. So I'd really loved a lot about my work with international businesses, but I didn't feel like I had a direct enough contact with people I wanted to help. So I decided to move back into London and work. I mean, I really wanted to work within my Buddhist community actually, but I hadn't managed to make that happen because there's not loads of jobs around. And yeah, so I really wanted to be helping people I had more direct contact with. So one way into doing that was in social housing. And then I went into working in fuel poverty. And I wasn't doing a huge amount of, well, I wasn't doing any public speaking really in social housing, but I learned a lot about fear and life and being a human during that period. I was doing public speaking within my Buddhist community. I'll get onto that in a moment. But there was this very important lesson that came out of that time supporting people in very vulnerable circumstances, which is that you are not in control. Yeah, a lot of our public speaking fear comes out of and is perpetuated by this desire to kind of control the situation. Like if I say the right thing, do the right thing, hold myself in this way, prepare in this right way, everything will go how I want it to, people will be happy, and then I will feel okay. Yeah, so your sense of feeling okay is based on your ability to control what happens outside of you. Does that make sense? I'm sure you probably have that feeling. Yeah, it's why you get so thrown off if someone asks you a question that you haven't prepared for properly, or a siren goes off, or lose your way, or whatever, or you're just having a bad day, or someone else is having a bad day in the audience. Yeah, so there's this particular thing that happened when I was working in social housing, which was one of the tenants I supported took their own life, and it threw me so much because I've been working so hard and had a lot of anxiety trying to support people who are in very vulnerable situations. Like my day started off right with triaging cases based on who was most at risk of dying or causing someone else to die through their behavior, and I work backwards through that. Yeah, so it's basically like emergency, like crisis response every single day. and I'd often be calling like emergency services for one reason or another. So I had a lot of concern about the people I was trying to help, and it felt so real. You know, like when I was working in with international businesses, of course there were very real lives that we were trying to help through working in ethical supply chains, because you're trying to make sure that people don't die in factories in another country or the UK, or whatever's going on. Like, there's awful things that can happen in supply chains. So it was very real, and there were very big consequences to people's decisions. But this was so immediate, because I was on the phone or directly supporting people or go visiting in their houses. And this person was someone who had not been able to see physically, hadn't been on my radar, and it just threw me when he died, because I think I realised I was doing everything I could to make sure he was okay so that I could feel okay. There was a kind of selfishness in there, It's like, if I make everyone else okay, then I'll be okay. And then someone really wasn't okay, and it just threw me. And also, when that happened, understandably, this person's family contacted us to see how we'd been treating that person, because we also dealt with things like rent arrears and stuff like that. And so it was my kind of first experience of potentially, this didn't actually happen, but there was this fear of being accused of something that either was not my fault, or maybe it was, like maybe it was my fault, that or maybe I had contributed to something, or maybe I could have done something better, and that might have affected him differently. But yeah, anyway, there was this real kind of realization around like, oh, you are not in control of what other people are doing, and really bad things can happen, and then somehow you need to live with that. So I was doing that work, and then I was working in fuel poverty in London as well. So helping people on the ground, but also feeding up into like policymakers like at Ofgem and other key stakeholders, so that there was this relationship between like boots on the ground, learning, trying to help people, and then also feeding up into the systemic and policy change that needed to happen. And that was very intense. Like, I was doing crisis support during COVID as well. And alongside of that, I was increasingly doing more teaching within my Buddhist community. I wasn't ordained yet. And so I'd go from these like really intense, emotionally demanding jobs that involved me needing to think like fast and strategically, and kind of like balance like literal fires at times, and awful thing like Grenfell happened at the time I was working in social housing, not to our provider, but as it was kind of in the mix too. So those like lives were genuinely at stake, and I'd hear all sorts of things like child abuse cases, having to go to an SPCC, like horrendous stuff going on. And then I'd then be going and teaching meditation to some random people I didn't know. Well, I was at Brixton Buddhist Centre eventually, with my partner who was chair for a number of years. And so I'd have to do this crazy switch, between basically I had vicarious trauma, and responding to people in desperate situations to teaching people to be calm. It was so wild. So many days I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I don't know how to, just like put a lid on it, basically, and go and respond. So imagine you've been in situations where really big things have happened, and then you need to go and write a sensitive email, or lead a client call, or go and give a presentation, and there's this moment where where all eyes are on you. Like, that's such an interesting moment for me, is this when the attention shifts onto you, like what happens then. And it's wild, isn't it, when you need to do that shift for people. So I was learning a lot through that period around working with like stuff that was real. I think a lot of the public speaking training out there can, and again, it's very, very good, but it's not necessarily designed to be dealing with this level of real emotion and real big things that you're tackling in your life and work. And then you're needing to be up front, when you've just been managing a crisis, or someone's just died, or someone's been screaming down the phone at you, or you're in a room with someone who's like crying because their son's died or whatever. It's like, how big things can happen. And also in your personal life as we'll get onto in a moment, you'll hear a few things that happened to me. So that was a really big shift for me during that period, is learning how to do that. And then so I was ordained in 2021, and after that I had a really big wobble. I had a big friendship fallout. It affected like a whole load of my other relationships as well. And I was just also, my heart was so heavy from so many years of, well, it would have been 10, 11 years, yeah, of working in social and environmental impact. I think I hadn't entirely lost hope for change, but it just seemed so much happen. And I think when you're working with people who are experiencing poverty and all sorts of other stuff, you know that how complex it is to help people. And so sometimes it just feels like you're banging your head against a brick wall, and then policy will change and it's less helpful and some people don't seem to care. And it's just, I think I was just heartbroken from existing as a human. And then I had all this friendship stuff go on within my Buddhist order. At the same time as I decided to leave my work and set up as a coach, because my partner and I had bought this van that I'm now in, and decided to like leave London and go and create this kind of completely alternative like van life thing, work that out. And I knew I needed to leave my job to do that, because I was in a leadership role, so I can just like leave. You know, it's a time for the organisation that I can go part-time and stuff. And I love that team, but I knew I needed to do something different. And also through my ordination process, I'd felt this really strong calling to go and be more of service to basically women like you in the world. I had this some very strong meditation practices. And there's this essay called The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action by Audre Lorde that I read just before ordination, that just somehow, anyway, I'll talk to you more about that essay at the end of this, and then we'll do some like particular sessions on it. But it lit a fire in me, I think, to go and do what I really felt called to do in the world and where I could be best of service, which I feel like this is what we're getting at here. So yeah, I decided to leave my job at the same time when I was like burnt out from like all my work, not that particular role, but just kind of like trying to deal with suffering in the world. I just felt my heart was so heavy. And then there's all this friendship stuff, and I was trying to make sense of being in the order, and which, you know, I'm still in and, you know, still love, but it was just really, really painful what I went through. And I know other people's experience of me was very painful during that period. And so I was at this all-time low at the same time as starting up my own coaching business, which is not a great time to feel horrendous. Like, I was crying basically every single day for a period, and I was also very, very angry and grieving. Like, so I was just like this mess of emotion. And still with undiagnosed ADHD at this point. That only happened this year, and I still don't have any medication for it. So there was a lot going on, right? Change in my life, financial uncertainty, blah, 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 existential crisis. And so during that period, I really had to learn like how you show up when you are at your worst. Yeah. And you still need to show up, like you still need to show up, you want to show up. Like, what motivates you then? Because I'd always had a very strong why until this point. And that felt like it just disappeared. Like I sort of gave up on humans for a while. Gave up on myself for a little bit, gave up on humans, and I sort of still really wanted to be a coach. There's still some bit of me that was like this light that was like, we still have something to do. So I just made this decision to just keep showing up and try to do some good in the world while I worked it all out and kind of found myself again during that period, while we were also building a van, which still isn't quite finished. And my partner was setting up as a consultant for Buddhist centres. He's a neuroscientist by background. He used to work at King's College London, and then worked within our Buddhist movement with Charit Brixton Buddhist Centre, really built that up, and then went into consultancy within our Buddhist order and movement. So there were a lot of moving parts going on at this point. But I got these like amazing clients, yeah, and I wasn't just doing public speaking training at that time. I was doing quite a bit around like leadership and well-being. I was sort of finding my feet as a coach and working out how to translate the Buddhist practices I'll get on to talking to you about into a more of a kind of like secular context. And then there's a few particular clients I had where stuff around communication and visibility and public speaking really came up, and that's where I really developed a love around it. And I also went on this retreat where these women were like, "You're such a natural." I'm like, no. Really, really not. And a woman on that retreat said, being around you is like being around sunshine. And again, that's not been my experience of myself for so long, but every time I was going onto a client call, getting ready for any kind of public speaking, or even just having to write any piece of communication, I said pause before turning on the camera. And I used to tell myself, I sort of ground myself in my body, I'd sort of breathe in and out, relax my belly, and I'd say, I'm a fucking ray of sunshine. And then I click go on the video. And I just did that every single day for such a long period of time that it seems at some point that and a whole bunch of other things I did helped me come out of that slump, so I could be in a situation where people genuinely felt that being around me. And I hope you get that feeling being around me too. So now I was building my confidence back up again. And it's a prime example, right, of how our confidence and willingness to be visible like goes up and down as women and leaders and founders. And then I was just kind of coming through some of that. I was getting back into coaching at Cambridge as well. And then my dad was diagnosed with cancer in August 2024. And 6 months later, he died. And a month later, in March, I think it was like the 13th. So March, let's call it March the 13th, 2025. I led his funeral to 140 people, loads of people from the Foreign Office because he worked there. I didn't see my dad that much growing up. But I think his work had been like a real inspiration for me to go and, you know, really do something in the world and travel and kind of tackle these big questions. So there's this room packed full of like Foreign Office leaders I'd never met before, didn't know people. And, you know, my dad's coffin. I was just checking if I was going to cry. My dad's, oh yeah, there we go. So my dad's coffin is there. And I'm delivering what is going to be like the most important speech of my entire life, yeah? And, oh, there we go. And it's like I'm crying because it's not that it was sad to me, it just felt so profound. Like I had this complete experience of just being full of so much love, yeah? That's where like all the tears come from. It's like I just accessed this place of such love for my audience and complete conviction for what I was talking about, because I wrote the whole of his eulogy, like I let his coffin in front of all these 140 people I didn't know, in a standing room, whatever. And these 20 minutes I could not mess around with. I had to really keep the script. And I did his eulogy, chose music, all of that with family, got the photos together. And oh my gosh, yeah, completely. Again, I'll do some specific videos on what his funeral taught me about public speaking. There's some particular things I did in the run up to that which I think are very helpful for any context you're in. It's just because I was in such an extreme environment, that's why I think they'll apply. But I learned then how important it is. I'm going to do this. This is like, we often have this like earth touching mudra that the Buddha did just before enlightenment, or around the time of his enlightenment. It's like I had to ground myself in absolute conviction and love for both my dad, myself, and the people in the room. And that's what kept me steady during that period, along with breathing techniques and visualizing the situation beforehand. But yeah, I was like so rooted in what I believed in that I just could not be shaken, even if it was really emotional and very difficult to be up there in some ways. And yeah, if you've ever got a family funeral coming up and you want some advice or tips and stuff, please do get in contact with me about that. And again, you can ask questions using the link below in the description for the page. So after my dad's funeral, I then went to Cambridge a couple months later to do a leadership workshop, and it went like okay, but one bit of feedback afterwards was woolly without clear takeaways, and they were completely right. I remember feeling like so humiliated to begin with. I felt like the blush come up. I was like oh, actually they're right. So I took a little break actually from being visible, because I think there are periods in your life when actually you're just not in the right headspace, and it's not about pushing through, particularly going through bereavement. Yeah, you need to be in the right place, otherwise it does you and your organization like reputational damage, basically. Yeah, like that person would have been understanding, but at the end of the day they paid time, you know, it was time and money, and there's opportunity cost with that, to come to my session, and they didn't feel like they had anything to take away from it. Now that's, you know, ethically it's not for me to go, oh don't worry, everyone else loved it, and plenty of people did enjoy it, but like there's an ethical point where actually you're just not in the right space to be upfront or doing certain things, and we have to make an ethical decision to like step back, sort ourselves out before we step in. Definitely have to do that, because sometimes, as I experienced then, you just cannot force yourself. Yeah, so like I'd ridden on a high through my dad's death and his funeral, because I was just in touch with so much love and like, is profundity a word? going to say it is, the profundity of life, that it really kind of sustained me. But after that, I just came off of it and kind of crashed out and was exhausted and burnt out again and stuff. And like grieving and trying to make sense of my life and all of that. So I did need to step back. Got a dog. He'll appear in some videos. He's called Pedro. He's a year old now. He's Cocker Spaniel. Love him. Dog obsessed. And then a little while ago, just basically after doing quite a bit of soul searching and working through bereavement, I've come back into doing public speaking stuff. And I feel like I am back and rearing to go. And I really want to talk to you now about some of the Buddhist stuff in particular that I think has been helpful. So I'm just going to step back kind of from that story and map out some ways of thinking and working with public speaking fear that might fall into a Buddhist framework. So we're just going to keep things simple today, because there's tons of practices and principles and lists and teachings and all of that. Yeah, you can go down through a real rabbit hole. There's like loads of stuff that you can draw on here. We're going to look at what fear is, and then we're going to look at what fear is, and then we're going to explore how we can approach working with public speaking fear from either samatha or vipassana. I'm just going to call it samatha and vipassana and check my pronunciation later on, because they're slightly different ways in to working with fear or any mental states, and I'm going to see which practices fall into that. We're at 46 minutes. Fuck it, we're just gonna take the time today, because we're getting to know each other, aren't we? You now know a bit about me. Love to know in the comments anything from my comment. I hate the word resonate because I feel everyone uses, but if anything about my story does resonate with you, please do say in the comments below. I'd love to hear, like, do you see similarities between your life and my life? Anything you'd like to know a little bit more about? What periods were particularly interesting to you? And I can share more about those in other videos. Yeah, we're gonna get now into a little bit about fear, a bit on samatha and vipassana practices. So what is fear? Yeah, so we could say, this is just our English words, that fear is produced when your mind comes into contact with the basically a thought, yeah? So the possibility of something bad happening in the future, yeah? And you can't be certain that's what's going to happen, yeah, because it might not, and you won't know how you actually feel during the time. But yeah, there's this kind of possibility of something bad happening in the future, and your interpretation that might happen, or its likelihood, is more or less accurate, and that's based on data you have from the past, isn't it? So it is like fear is a mental construct. Yeah, it's like I went to have some injections like a while ago, and I remember slightly bracing myself for it hurting, and I was anxious. And then actually it was fine. I was like, oh yeah, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Yeah. So yeah, it's a mental construct, but yeah, it's based on data. It's based on in the past needles have hurt. Yeah. So, but my public speaking fears, yeah. In the past I have had experiences when it's gone really badly wrong. So yeah, we need to know that it is mental construct. There's something going on in your mind, and a lot of that's just unconscious. Yeah, it's almost like you're wearing like fear glasses. Yeah, we talk about rose tinted glasses, but it's more like when you do public speaking, you're wearing like fear tinted glasses. So it's more like your mind is kind of like braced, but there might actually be conscious thoughts. Or when you're in a one-to-one coaching session or doing some reflections, like I'll give people reflection questions, then those thoughts might become more conscious, like, oh my gosh, what happens if they ask me about X? Or what if I mess this up? Would I get fired? Da, 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 da. Like a lot of the thoughts, you can kind of like draw them out a little bit to get into some of the deeper fears that are underneath. Yeah, but it's not like you're necessarily going around thinking those very consciously. It's more just like this predisposition, or as I said, you're wearing like fear tinted glasses. That's going on in the mind, and then that's kicking off stuff in the body. Yeah, so in anticipation of this bad thing happening in the future, your body is producing hormones. So I'm not a scientist, but I know the words adrenaline and cortisol because I've been told that happens in my body. And that then produces symptoms to varying degrees of severity, don't they? So you might get anything from shaky hands, a raised heart rate, your throat might constrict, all the way through to like blushing. I used to blush, and I still do a bit actually. blushing, or, yeah, it might all go all the way through to panic attacks. One of my clients had like facial spasms. She was under so much kind of pressure and stress around public speaking, so work was very difficult. So your body's got stuff going on. And then you've got speech. So in Buddhism, we talk about mind, body, and speech, transforming mind, body, and speech. So speech I find actually quite interesting because it's a product of the mind and the body. So it's what you say and how you say it. So, you know, if you're talking particularly fast, that's often to do with you being a bit anxious, or just it's just that your nervous system is stimulated. So I'm often a bit fast with how I talk here because I'm just excited and feel passionate about it. Yeah, there's just emotion, and then it's kind of coming up like boom. But that also happens when you're afraid. You might fumble on your words, the tone that you use. I think that's how you can often tell the difference between if someone's like passionate and excited versus if they're afraid. Is like, does it feel like it's coming across with like a tone of love or fear? Yeah, I'm hoping my tone is coming out as like as love, because that's how what I'm feeling inside, just like love for you, and then that's hopefully coming across in the tone. So yeah, so we could break fear down into different things going on in our mind, our body, and our speech. And then interestingly, what happens is that all kind of goes out into the world. Other people react to it, and then that also influences us. Yeah, and there's this kind of like feedback loop, isn't there, between what's going on inside and what's going on in the world, and then what's going on inside and what's going on in the world. And this is how our mind, well, this whole thing around mind creates the world. But anyway, we'll go into that another time. So Buddhism has a lot to say about fear and other difficult, unpleasant mental states. And of course, just to say, like, fear, like biologically, like it makes sense that we are wired to look out for things that might eat us and harm us. And that is why, you know, in social situations, we often have so much fear, is because we're social beings. Like, we cannot exist without being, you know, without a community of people. Like, your food is produced by the people, your home is built by someone, your medical care is provided by someone. Like, if you are ostracized, yeah, you would die. So it makes sense from just a biological, like, survival point of view that you are like very kind of clearly like programmed to look out for any suggestion that you might be rejected by the social group. Yeah, so it has like a biological function. So I'm not saying it's like inherently a bad thing, yeah, but it's not helpful for us in some situations, is it? So Buddhism's got lots of frameworks and lists to work with fear, and I just want to talk about this simple one of looking at or dividing practices or approaches into samatha and vipassana. So what is the difference? You probably haven't come across the word samatha practice if you've had nothing to do with Buddhism and meditation before, but you might have heard, or even heard of someone else going off to vipassana retreats, yeah, like what we call insight meditation retreats. You might have heard them like staring at a wall for 7 hours a day or something like that. We don't do that within my order, but anyway. So what is actually the difference? And this is just like a functional way of splitting out practices. Yeah, let's not get too literal about it. So with samatha practices, we're looking at calming and brightening the mind, a kind of sense of kind of like buoyant tranquility. And then in Vipassana, I don't know if it is Vipassana or Vipassana. I have to look that up. It's when it's paired with samatha, yeah, because you either pronounce it in Pali or Sanskrit, and if I'm saying it's samatha, then I need to say it a particular way. So maybe it is Vipassana. Probably is Vipassana if I'm saying samatha and not shamatha. Anyway, this is a dharmic point that you need to be exploring with me right now. I'm going to go for a bit Vipassana because it just sounds better and it's easier for me to say with my list. So yeah, Vipassana is about seeing reality clearly. Yeah, seeing things clearly. That's why the word insight is used. Yeah, like sight. Yeah, seeing things clearly. So one way of looking at them, what's that sound? Might be a bird. One way of looking at them is that you the symptoms of fear. Yeah, you could see them as being like waves. Here you go. I'll explain this curtain to you. So one way, I'm getting off track here. Let me have a quick bit of water. I did not expect to be talking for an hour, but here you go. We're still here, so we're going to keep going. So you could see it as being like fear as being like waves on the top of the ocean. But actually, those waves are getting caused the symptoms of fear, like waves on top of the ocean, yeah, so the shakiness and freezing and all of that, the fight or flight stuff, but they're getting caused by something going on in the depths. And this is why I got this curtain, because there's this beautiful sutta called the Tuvataka Sutta, and at some point it says something like, there are no waves from the depths of the sea, it is still unbroken, the same is true of the follower, she is still unbroken. So I love this feeling of like, or this like inspiration to be sort of so transformed that I don't experience any of those waves. Yeah, that kind of tumultuousness when you can get when fear arises. So yeah, with Vipassana practices, we're trying to get like underneath the fear, to get to the views that are not, well, I'm going to say triggering, but I don't mean like triggering, but yeah, triggering the sense of kind of fear in the first place. Yeah, so what if you could just take off the fear tinted glasses and you just, fear didn't arise in the first place? Yeah, that's where we're getting at with Buddhism. It's not feeling the fear and doing it anyway. It's like getting to the point where we have so broken free of greed, hatred and delusion that the fear just does not arise at all. It's very aspirational, isn't it? That's what I like about Buddhism. It's very transformative. It's not just like a little power pose here or there. So quite a lot of public speaking well, not a lot of it, but some of the stuff that I see out there, it doesn't either fall into calming and brightening the mind or seeing things clearly. Just like tells you what to do. So it just gives you a script, like just say these things, yeah, or try and ways to like hide or mask your fear. Now that is not helpful. It gives you what I call kickback. So you might be all right in the moment, but afterwards you probably feel awful and have lots of feelings of self-hatred or struggle to come down afterwards. That's a sign to me that you've just been trying to be very rigid, yeah, and just kind of suppress all the emotions. You're not calming. You're just like, I just will not show people I'm afraid. Or you like can't get off script, yeah, and if someone says something that's outside of your script, then you don't know what to do. So that's not very helpful long term, is it? So with samatha practices, you've got things like breathing exercises. You might have come across the box breath, like breathe in for 4, out for 4, that sort of thing. You'll have the old power poses. I love a power pose, but they're not the whole solution. And often those have come from, you know, traditions like yoga, tai chi, qigong, that sort of thing. Now meditation posture, you know, like a sat down posture, I mean, I can't sit in full lotus, it's not the point, but even just like basic meditation posture is in a way a power pose, because you're communicating kind of calm and groundedness to the body and to your mind. I think it's like the Zen tradition that's really all about posture. Actually, there's a huge amount about just kind of relaxing more and more and getting into the right posture, and then having an influence on the mind. There's also things like mindfulness meditations as well that you might have come across. So a lot of those practices, they are very helpful. I use them too. They've been great for panic attacks and all sorts of things. But they'll sometimes, yeah, and they might work beforehand, but sometimes in the moment, if your anxiety is more severe or you're at front, or say you're blushing, something happens that's outside of your control, then they just don't seem to work quickly enough. And that's basically because those hormones, like the adrenaline, for example, has already been triggered in your body, and so that is still having an impact, yeah. The breathing practices will help you calm down, but there's already something in motion that you then have to work with. And you know, one of my clients, as I said, was having panic attacks and facial spasms like before and after. So you know, you're going to need something a bit more than like warrior 2 or whatever yoga pose you try to work with that level of fear in your body. I also think the way that some practices are taught is to make you basically even more hypervigilant of your body. I think as women are already conditioned to like sit this way, sound like this, be pleasing, don't stand out too much, like stand out enough but not too much, otherwise you'll be called a slut and you'll have lots of bad attention. You know, there's a lot from when we're a young age around like how your body looks. There's a lot of attention on you in that particular way. And so I think some of these methods, if they're treated in an isolated way, just teach you basically to be more hypervigilant, yeah, and just like you just feel like you're not doing the right thing. And I think it's a horrible way to exist in the world, basically. That is why I don't like that on its own. Often there's a lot of hatred associated with that, self-hatred associated with that too. And often you're just going to come across quite stiff, yeah, because you're trying to control all your movements and keep your back like this and relax and da-da-da-da. So you're physically stiff, and then you come off stiff in how you're communicating with people. You're not very natural, yeah, because you're just trying to like keep a lid on all your emotions. Makes you quite, yeah, like we'd say like wooden, doesn't it? Wouldn't we? So yeah, so those on their own, I don't think they're enough. You might have found that they're not enough either. And again, like I said, I love a power pose in the loo, or a breathing exercise, or whatever. Like, they're all helpful. It's just not having them like on their own. That's why I don't think they're enough. Now, some of the some of the stuff that people teach does fall into another category of samatha practice, which is around developing positive emotions. So people might say, like, be kind to yourself, which I hate because I don't think it tells you anything. Now, we have specific practices within my Buddhist order to develop kindness, to develop loving kindness. So metta is the word for loving kindness, metta in Pali, or maitri in Sanskrit. And then bhavana just means like the cultivation of. So the cultivation of a loving kindness practice is the metta bhavana. Well, yeah, it's a very specific method. And like, you go and find it. Like, I've got a version on the Brixton Buddhist Centre when I still called Charlotte. London Buddhist Centre has a load of stuff. Yeah, there's all sorts of metta bhavana practices around there. So yeah, some of the advice that's given, like cute little advice like be kind to yourself, it's just not specific enough. It doesn't actually give you an action to do with your mind. Yeah, because this is all about mind training here. So yeah, some of it's just too vague. And also, like, if you're not feeling kind to yourself, you've got a lot of if you're very self-critical and you're like, you know, there's this voice in your head that goes, that was pathetic, why are you still like this, blah blah blah. If then you just tell yourself, be kind, I need to be kind to myself, it's just like annoying, isn't it? It just feels artificial and insincere. So there's methods, well, there's a particular method that I've developed called the Kindness Collective, which will be on here soon, that, like, for me helps me develop a sense of kindness towards myself even when I'm not particularly feeling it. So again, we need specific methods that work for particular circumstances. And there's also other positive emotions that we focus on within Buddhism. So loving kindness, metta, is just one of what we call the Brahma Viharas, and the others are compassion, equanimity, and empathetic joy. And those are also all very, very important to cultivate in the public speaking context as well. The other thing that I think is missing out there is like a focus on ethics. So like mental tranquility from a Buddhist perspective also comes through like ethical purity. I don't mean being like Puritan, but you know, like the values of like kindness and generosity and contentment, truthfulness and mindfulness, which are 5 basic ethical precepts in Buddhism. You, like, if you're not trying to keep to those and being aware of when you're not, your mind will be less tranquil. Like, if I've had an argument or been a bit mean to my partner before doing something, my mind won't be very tranquil. Yeah, and it's the same with you. Or if you're a bit sharp with someone, or you haven't, you know, I think if you feel like you've lacked integrity in terms of how you've prepared for something, that weighs on your mind too. Yeah. Actually, maybe you haven't thought something through as much as you need to, and then that's on your mind during a presentation as well. So I think with women, because there's been such a push towards like kindness and being compassionate, things can just get a little bit fluffy. Whereas it actually is, you know, in a way, it's fine to be a bit embarrassed that you didn't do as good a job as you wanted to, or you could have prepared better, or you didn't respond as well as you could. In Buddhism, like, we distinguish between like unhelpful feelings of guilt and I keep thinking there's someone coming in, but there's not. And like a genuine helpful sense of like shame, like an ethical shame. It's just like a sense of like falling short of your values, which is very important as a leader. Yeah, we don't want to pretend that there aren't things in which we need to things that we need to improve. So yeah, I think if you don't have a system that's also rooted in looking at your ethics and the ethical approach to communication and public speaking and leadership as a whole, I think you're really missing a trick there. So there's a bit on like the samatha practices and what might be missing. Again, like, there's a lot out there that's very, very good, but there's a few components that I think need to be fleshed out more. And then with Vipassana practices, like seeing things clearly, this is like working with your mind. And as I said, trying to take off these fear-tinted glasses in the first place. So some of the advice out there is trying to deal with the mind directly from a non-Buddhist perspective. And again, like, I don't think Buddhism has got the monopoly on this. I'm just kind of questioning some of the advice that just feels a bit superficial. So one of the things that I hear quite frequently when we get told, and I've been told, is don't worry, you'll be fine. And the thing I wanted to pull out there is that people are essentially saying on the "you'll be fine." So what they're saying is your prediction for the future is incorrect. Yeah, bad thing won't happen to you. So just change your view of the future, and then you don't need to worry, and you'll feel okay about yourself. Yeah. So like basically, you'll be great. Like there's nothing to worry about, that sort of thing. I'm sure people have told you that before. Now there is some validity in that because your interpretation of a situation can be incorrect, and it's really important to they'd be challenging your view of a situation of yourself or of the other person. Like if someone's frowning, for example, like they might just be unwell. That's happened to me before, yeah, and I got into a whole thing in my head, really started questioning whether I was saying the right thing. Just turned out this poor woman just had constipation, yeah. So you can make things mean something they don't, or you might be worried like, oh my gosh, if I get this wrong, then I'm going to be fired. Well, like check that out with your boss, and they're probably like, no. Unless you say something like deeply offensive and discriminatory. Like, no, you're not going to be fired. So there is validity in that, but actually I don't think it's helpful in all situations, partly because it can also be incorrect. Now, the women I work with, like a lot of them have like very, you know, like it's like serious jobs that they're doing, yeah. So actually, if they do mess up, there are consequences to that, like in a public speaking context, but also like just generally as leaders, and that will affect how comfortable you feel up front, yeah. So in some situations, if you screw up, there might be a lawsuit, there might be a reputational damage, there might, like, someone might get harmed, you know. All sorts of things can happen that are actually bad, and that means you wouldn't be fine. So I don't think it's very helpful, because you do need to prepare for those situations. Things might go on in the organization. There's often like ethical dilemmas. Yeah, like I found that within like working with international businesses. Things aren't always clear cut. And you, your organization, a supplier, someone else connected to you might end up in the news for ethical reasons, yeah? That's not okay. What will your children think about you if your face and your name end up in the papers, splashed all over the internet for doing or saying something that other people don't think is okay? Yeah, that can happen. But also other people, even if you do all the right things, again, my point, going back to my point about you're not in control, other people might misinterpret you or take things out of context. And there are, like, also on the extreme end, because I'm helping women and all doing all sorts of things, like there is also the risk of violence, and we see that with women on, you know, on the internet. Now, I was at Pembroke College, where Jo Cox, who is the Labour MP, she went to Pembroke College, and every time I'm in there normally having breakfast on my own, I sit in front of her portrait, and I get moved talking about her, because that is a woman who spoke up about what she believed in, and she was murdered for it, yeah? So, you know, most of the time you're not going to be in a situation that is going to happen, or even is even a possibility, but it is there in the background of some women's mind when they're speaking up about power or representing people. Like, there are, you know, forces of, if you want to call it evil or darkness or just very troubled people in the world, who do not believe in what you believe in. Yeah, and we can go around and have this nice fluffy idea that everyone's like nice and in it all together. That is just not true, yeah? And even that, as I said, that is on the extreme end, but yeah, it's not the case. Everyone is going to be on our side and just treat us in a way that's okay. And I do think for a lot of women, at least in terms of getting like abuse online or being stalked or anything like that is definitely a valid concern for a lot of women. So yeah, we can't just tell women everything is going to be fine. We need to be like getting the skills for how to feel calm and sort of stay calm when things are not fine. That's what I'm really interested in. I think that's why I had such an eye-opener with that situation with my dad and leading his funeral, because nothing about that situation was fine. My dad's dead body was a few meters away from me, and I was doing this talk, yeah? So, yeah, how do we sort of stay really rooted and say what we believe in when things are not fine? How do you stay calm in that storm? How do you drop down to the depths of the ocean so you're in that place where it's kind of still and you're not battered about by the storm above you? So Buddhism and, you know, plenty of other, you know, religions and practices paths, whatever you want to call them, offer what we call these insight practices. So seeing reality more clearly. And in Buddhism, there's lots of different things that we can reflect on, but we do reflect on death quite a lot. There's a big thing in Buddhism, reflecting on death. And so why is this helpful? And it's not just to be morbid or to just make yourself feel depressed. And you do have to be careful when you do death reflection, because if you're not in good mental states, they can lead to you spiraling quite a bit. So if you're depressed or there's other things going wrong, then you need to just be working on, just being a happy, healthy person. I think that's certainly been in my experience and what I've been advised in the past. But reflecting on impermanence, and not just like, oh, there's a flower and the flower died and I'll die too, blah blah blah, and they're not going deep. But I mean, like, really, like, being in genuine contact with the fact that you have a limited lifespan and so do other people. It creates a kind of sense of urgency, and well, for me, it puts me back into this place where I realise that my like ethical integrity is so important to me, because, as I said multiple times, like, you aren't in control. Things are going to happen that you don't want, that you don't like, that are awful to you and to the people you love and things you care about and all of that. And all we have at the end of it is just the choices that we've made in our life, and whether or not we feel we've really strayed from what we most deeply believe in. Yeah. And I think when we're not in alignment with our values and what's most important, that is when we often feel a lot of conflict within ourselves. Yeah. And it's hard to speak with conviction because you don't believe in yourself. Yeah. And before I was ordained, this is the last sort of thing I'm going to talk about before wrapping up. Now, there's loads of like particularly like Buddhist reflections and Buddhist meditation practices around reflecting on death and all of that. But most recently, and this was like 5 years ago now, one of the things that really, really struck me was this essay by Audre Lorde called The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. Now, I can't remember when she was live, but she was tackling racism, sexism, homophobia, various other forms of discrimination. And she's such an inspiring writer. A lot of her lectures were published, a lot of the lectures. There's a collection called Your Silence Will Not Protect You, and that's a quote taken from this essay. And she basically she's been fighting against all these things and speaking up against them, knowing that her life is threatened, because she does that, because she dares to speak about these things. So that's a very real threat to her. And then she finds a lump in her breast, and there's this period when she's waiting to find out whether or not it's cancer. And she has, she's not a Buddhist, she wasn't a Buddhist, but she has such a profound insight into impermanence and the nature of suffering. It's incredible. So we will do a series like unpacking the whole of the essay, but I really just recommend you going and finding that essay and reading it. I just breathed it in. My friend Claude gave it to me, or put me onto it just before my ordination retreat, and I just read it. Like, I just used to have it under my bed and carried it with me everywhere. It's like all underlined. But yeah, so she has this realization that she can't choose when she dies, and she's being so careful. Well, she's not super careful with what she says, but she's thinking a lot about what she says. Yeah, so she's not holding back, but she's very aware that what she says may cause her to be harmed. It may even cost her life. And she realizes, though, in potentially getting cancer, that she has no control over when she dies and how she dies. Like, she can't prevent herself from suffering and dying in that place. And you can read it and you can like feel it in your bones reading this essay, that it like completely kind of like rewires a brain or something. So I'm just going to read a few lines to you and then we'll wrap up. Yeah. So she says, in becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in the merciless light. And what I had regretted most were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To question or to speak as I believed could have meant pain or death, but we all hurt in so many ways all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence. And that might be coming quickly now, without regard for whether I had ever spoken what needed to be said, or had only betrayed myself into small silences, while I planned some day to speak, or waited for someone else's words. And I began to recognise a source of power within myself that comes from the knowledge that while it is most desirable not to be afraid, learning to put fear into a perspective gave me great strength. I was going to die, if not sooner than later, whether or not I had ever spoken myself. My silences had not protected me. Your silence will not protect you. God, every time I read that, it makes me cry. Every time I read that, it makes me cry. What I want to say, I think, like, when we have a genuine felt sense of our own mortality and our inability to control what happens around us and control what people do to us, I think what she's speaking to is this great freedom of the heart and this kind of courage that emerges, so that we can live with ourselves and die with ourselves, kind of knowing that we've done what we needed to do. I mean, that was just taking a few of the stuff, like, but I feel like every single line from that essay, just every single time I read it out to myself, to other people, just like hits me in this place that just calls on me to lead a life of integrity and courage. And that's what I think we want to get to with public speaking, is to believe in what we are saying and know that we have such limited time to say it in, that we just feel compelled. Yeah, we feel compelled to communicate and to make a difference in the world, even when it might backfire and might cause us harm. Like, I don't feel like I live by that all the time, by any means. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm a particularly brave person, but something in her words calls something bigger out of me that I hope you can feel called to as well. But it comes from being rooted into this realization that we will suffer, and we cannot stop ourselves from suffering, and we cannot stop ourselves from dying either. And something in us can break free when we're deeply in contact with that. As I said, there's all sorts of practices that we can do to get to that point, but I think even just reading that essay, and I haven't read it for a number of years now, probably, but I feel like it can call something out of you that is desperate to be breathed into the world. And that's what I'm really about in this channel. Not just like, you know, doing a nice presentation here or there, but to I was going to say manifest, but I kind of hate the word, but I mean it in this kind of really sincere way, but to like manifest something that you believe in, to make it real in the world. Because I believe if you're here and with me, you feel called to do something that is much bigger than yourself. Yeah. And that is why there is other advice out there that I just don't like particularly. Like, one in particular is like wanting to own the room. Yeah, having a sense of like, let's own the room. It's like, this is not about you. Yeah, it is not about you owning anything. It's not about your audience owning anything. This is about you believing in something so deeply and wanting the other people that you're communicating with to be part of that. Yeah. And you're so sort of rooted in what you believe in and want to breathe this goodness into the world that it's just so compelling to other people as well, that they can't but help themselves to get involved with you and what it is that you're calling them towards as well. Yeah, so we're going beyond this polarization. That's another thing that Buddhism talks a lot about, this kind of polarization into self and other. And that's what often goes on in public speaking. We're polarized between or separate from our audience and from ourselves. Yeah, and then you're trying to get something from the audience or own the room or whatever it is. But when we can step away from that and just call ourselves and the people in the room to greatness together, it's a very, very different thing. Yeah, you're speaking from this completely different place. So you're not trying to influence or manipulate people. You're just saying, like, look at this beautiful world. Oh, fuck, I'm going again. You're just trying to say, like, look at this beautiful world we could create together. Couldn't this be so glorious? And I know it is hard. And I know there are so many things that stand in our way, including myself and you and each other and all the things that we do together to get stuck in our silliness and our pettiness and our destructiveness. But this is what we're saying, look at this gloriousness that we could live in together. Don't you want to come and be part of that too? This is what I'm trying to do. Do you want to come and be part of that too? That's all we're doing, yeah, when it really, really comes down to it. That's the kind of approach to public speaking that I'm trying to teach in here, yeah? And do you see how, like, when we're trying to communicate from that place, a little power pose or a little mantra of be kind to yourself is not going to be enough. It does not go deeply enough. I've got to the end of my random notes. I had on this. What do I want to say to wrap this up? Normally I've got a whole thing about what I want to say at the end. Let's just take a moment. If you believe in a world that is radically different, I'm going to shut my laptop. If you believe in a world that is radically different to the one that we exist in now, if you believe in a world that is filled of goodness and kindness and peace and joy and courage, yeah, not some like la la land, yeah, that's kind of it, but you know, that really kind of embraces the ugliness and the difficulty and the suffering of being human. If you want a kind of glorious world to live in together that is radically different to the one we are in now, but you know, kind of has the seeds of it in how we are together. If you want that radically different world, yeah, you are going to need a radical approach for overcoming your public speaking fear, yeah? You're going to need an approach and a system that will sustain you when things are so unbelievably hard. You question why you are doing this, yeah? You question why you are bothered, why you are putting all of your time, energy and money into it. You're going to need something that will root you so much in that vision of the world that even when you feel lost for a while, because you will, because I have and you will, that system, that framework will get you back onto your path and it will root you back into what you believe in and it will connect you up to other people who believe in that too. So if you want a system, a framework, a methodology that will provide that to you as much as possible, that is what I'm trying to offer you here, yeah? There's elements that I think of actual Buddhism that probably are needed, that sustain me, that I feel really are like they're getting into like the slightly more woo-woo stuff, but I feel like so much of what I offer is trying to like translate that into a way that's as sort of accessible to you as possible. If you are interested in that and you are willing to put time, effort and like money and invest that in yourself, yeah, to go and create this goodness in the world, then this is a place for you. I would love to help you. There's videos on here that you can dip in and out of. You can apply to have your question answered on this show. As I've said, there's links in the video description and also my biography. And also you can apply to work for me as well. Let's see if we would be a good fit. My email address or my contact details. No, first of all, let's just do it this way, yeah, because I think on YouTube I'm trying to not just have like my random email address out there all the time. No, fuck it, you can have my email address. I'll put my email address below. Contact me, reach out, just put apply in the subject title and I'll get details over to you about working together. Lots of love. I'll see you in the next one. It's a bit longer than I thought it would be. Love you lots. Bye.